Now, he's a baseball player like no other, Shohei Ohtani. But what has been so far just a success story for the Japanese star is facing maybe its first series challenge. Ohtani's developed an injury, and there is speculation that he perhaps might need Tommy John surgery. And obviously, there's a concern about what that means for his future pitching. And given his two-way style, his incredible performance both on the mound and with the bat. It would be a real shame if one half of that equation was impacted by the surgery. So, Alan, and I guess there's also the question around about he's a very, very hot free agent, or potentially a very, very hot free agent. What does the timing mean for that? And potentially could be many, many millions of dollars at stake.
Yeah, yeah. The timing was in so many ways as dramatic as it could be. I'm always Americans are falling in love with a bit of soccer just now because they've got this superstar Messi over there, and of course Ohtani sort of falls into similar bracket. And you're trying. Messi's gone there at the end of his career, and the financial implications of that are obviously he's gone there. He must fancy the lifestyle. He must fancy the league. He'll be getting well remunerated for it. But there you go. So Ohtani was half linked to be traded in the last trade window in the summer. And they were talking about deals of like $500 million potentially. And then 2 weeks later, he gets a UCL injury. And you take away a big part of the guy, a massive part of the guy if he's going to pitch again, if he's going to miss a season of pitching. He's still batting. Now, I think that I don't quite understand how you would have an injury that's potentially going to need surgery, but you're able to carry on with another part of the game, which does involve your hands. I didn't realize as well. I mean, it shows you. It makes me wonder what I know at times, but apparently he bats and pitches with different hands. So he does one right-handed and one left-handed. So yeah, the lad seems to have a lot of different skills, a lot of different abilities. Foreseeing the future injury wasn't one of them, because potentially, the chat is it would cost him $200 million in his transfer or his future contracts, so to speak. Is that important when you're going to pick up another $300 million? Yes, and no. But it just goes to show you how vulnerable these guys can potentially be. And is he fortunate that he's got the ability to? Well, he is obviously fortunate. He's got the ability to do both. But I just what's a comparison in football? I don't know there is anything, because if you get injured, career injury like that, you can't do anything. So it's one of the unique things about baseball, isn't it, Dave?
I'd imagine the most similar one I could think of in football just now is we're all thinking about, or we've seen the whole Mbappe thing play out with PSG, where there's been a possibility of him moving across to Saudi Arabia, and he's made it quite clear, or it seems to be clear within the public domain, that he's off to Real Madrid next summer. So PSG came out to say, well, make a decision. We're going to get rid of you now, or and we want the money that we want unless you can commit to us long term. He didn't bother. He's still there. He's still doing his thing. So that would be my example, would be Mbappe. If he were to break down this season and have a real long-term injury, that could be something that would be similar to what Ohtani's going through just now. I seen an article the other day about the other teams who are in on Ohtani. It's not too shocking who they might be, the kind of big market teams. One of those as well is the Cubs, who seem to be having a little bit of a resurgence as well. We take credit for that after cheering them on to a degree in London. But one of the other teams was Boston, who I don't know if Dave's aware of that, or your own thoughts on the Ohtani situation.
Well, yes. I'd kind of love to see him at Boston. Whether that would happen in terms of, what we were talking about earlier in terms of payroll. I mean, going back not too many years, Boston will always see themselves and have been one of the big market teams. and what goes along with that is usually a high payroll. They've gone down from, second or third in the last few years to almost at the average, and relying a bit on their farm system. And famously they let Mookie Betts go a few years ago, went for a over $300 million long-term deal. They have signed third baseman Devers to a $300 million plus 10-year deal. But whether the ownership would, prior to this injury, whether they would okay a $500 million deal for Ohtani, I don't know. But if they're going to do it for anybody, they would. You do it for Ohtani, wouldn't you? Because he is literally two players in one. Now, how is that possible? You say, well, if he's the designated hitter, he can be playing in every game, and he's hitting as well, if better than anyone else in the game. And on top of that, he's one of the top starters, so he'll be starting pitching for you once every 5 games. Now, it's kind of been, but you did say, just to digress briefly, is there a comparison? And previously we do try and bring in other sports, and cricket is one of mine. And I would beg to say that Ben Stokes, the England Test captain, is almost like 3 players in one. And he had an injury problem in the Ashes series, and one of the Test matches he wasn't really able to bowl. So he's an all-rounder. He's a brilliant attacking batsman, very good seam bowler, but also he's the captain. So he's like the manager on the pitch. So he calls the game. So he's like 3 players in one, and he couldn't really bowl in one of the games, but he's still there because he's the captain and he's a match-winning batsman. But yeah, it is shocking that Shohei has had this injury. I have a feeling that he's already in his career. I need to check this. Has he already had Tommy John surgery? Sometimes, sometimes I've seen it said that if you have that, early enough in your career, you almost come back with a stronger arm. And I've also heard it said that some players, even before they break into the MLB, if there's any suggestion that they're going to suffer with that, they will have the Tommy John surgery before they go into the majors almost. And with the knowledge that it may improve, strengthen their arm, but if he has to have a second Tommy John surgery, he could be out in terms of pitching for not just 1 season, but potentially 2 seasons. Just depends on how it goes. So that is very, very serious. But he would still be, and the one hope that they had in Boston is because we've got obviously the very successful Masa Yoshida, who's come from the Japan leagues and has been a great success. And we were kind of hopeful that that might be a good positive reason for Shohei to come to Boston. But I think it's a little bit up in the air now who will sign him and whether, in fact, he'll even move. He's got still got a year on his contract, I think, hasn't he? Anyway, so the reason why they're talking about trading him is because they would get more for him now because he's got 1 year left on his contract. If they insisted on him playing, if they can do that next season, and he goes as a complete free agent, they would get very little or not as much as they would get now in return, because of course it's not a transfer fee as such. The contract goes to the player, but in order to obtain him from the Angels, a team would need to offer incentives in terms of prospects for up and coming players for Ohtani. So yeah, I think it's a real shame that it's happened, because it was one of the great stories of the game in not just this year or last year, but in the history of the game, really. And if he can't be that two-way player, we're going to lose out quite significantly, I think, as fans and the game in general.
Yeah. It was interesting. Dave Jr. mentioned Lucas Giolito early on, so obviously gone to the Angels as well, and you would have thought there was some sort of added value in there for them with him not pitching. But did the Angels go all in at the trade deadline and then decide it wasn't happening, and then they thought, yeah, we need to free up the cash? So many different things with the contract situations there as well. So yeah, Shohei Ohtani. Will we see him in Chicago, Dave Jr.?
If we do, it'll only be in one half of the city, that's for sure, Alan. It won't be on the south side. Interestingly enough, Jerry Reinsdorf came out and actually said that openly. So it was one of his first interviews
Right.
for years, openly, when he was just asked about a numerous amount of topics. And they said, we are not the type of club who will be in on Ohtani at all.
Yeah.
Just to kind of clarify one of the things Dave mentioned earlier, Ohtani's a free agent this year.
Is
So
he?
he will,
Right.
yeah. I just done a quick check on the side there, so I think that's why the Angels, as Alan said, went all in at the trade deadline, because at that moment in time, the Mariners didn't have the recent resurgence they've been going through,
Yeah.
so they thought there was still a good chance at the wild card berth, but it's just all went Pete Tong, I'm afraid, for the Angels. But Ohtani, I mean, in a way, I hate to say this, he seems like the type of guy, well, he's beloved everywhere, but the Cubs are probably one of the most beloved clubs across the country. You could see him flourishing for a team like the Cubs, an organisation that market themselves so well, that are known worldwide. Let's face it, he could probably turn up at any of the 30 teams and do them all a turn and help drag them onto a worldwide stage. But the Cubs might be a good fit for him. You never know. But the guy's he's so talented. He really is unreal. You and Dave in particular have been championing him for the last 18 to 24 months. And he really is. There's no sign of him letting up whatsoever.
Okay. Well, you heard it here
Even with an injury.
Yeah, you heard it here first that Shohei Ohtani is going to Chicago and will be playing for the club of the Cubs in 2024. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Highland Bullpen, and we look forward to catching up with you again soon.